I need you to stop scrolling right now and look at me. Really look at me. I'm 76 years old. I'm a black woman, and I spent half a century of my life believing I was invisible. Not because I wanted to disappear, not because I was naturally quiet or shy, but because the world around me taught me day after day, year after year, that people who looked like me weren't supposed to be seen. And I believed it. For 50 long years, I believed that my place was in the background, in the shadows, silent and small. Until one day I understood something that changed absolutely everything. I was never invisible. I was just looking in the wrong mirror. My name is Ruth. I was born in 1949 in Atlanta, Georgia, in a small house with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors breathing. And I need to tell you this story today because I see you making the same mistake that almost destroyed me. You're letting the world decide how much you're worth. And the world lies. It lies all the time. I was 7 years old when I first learned that my presence was a problem. In school, I sat in the third row, right in the middle. I loved reading. I was good at it. But when the teacher asked someone to read aloud, she never called on me. Never. I'd raise my hand so high my shoulder hurt, and she'd look right through me like I was made of glass, like I wasn't even there. For months I thought it was because I was stupid. I thought maybe I read wrong, maybe my voice was annoying, maybe I smelled bad. I spent hours trying to figure out what was wrong with me. It took me years to understand that it wasn't about me at all. It was because I was the only black girl in that classroom. And black girls weren't supposed to be heard. We were supposed to clean the blackboard, not read from books. We were supposed to serve, to stay quiet, to take up no space at all. At 14, I started working as a maid for a white family on the other side of town. The woman who hired me never asked my name. She called me the girl for 3 years straight. I'd serve lunch at their table while the family sat around talking, laughing, arguing about politics and movies and who said what to whom. And I was right there, 2 feet away from them, holding a pitcher of iced tea, completely invisible. Nobody asked how my day was. Nobody looked at me when they said thank you. I was just a pair of hands that put plates down and took them away. Not a person, not someone with thoughts or feelings or dreams, just hands. And you know what happens when you spend years being treated like you don't exist? You start to believe it. You really do. I started walking with my head down everywhere I went. Started talking so quietly, people had to ask me to repeat myself 3 times. Started making myself physically smaller, hunching my shoulders, taking up less space on the bus, standing in corners at church. I thought if I could just make myself small enough, invisible enough, I wouldn't bother people. And if I didn't bother people, maybe they'd accept me. Maybe they'd let me stay. But here's the truth I learned too late. You can shrink yourself down to the size of a grain of sand, and they'll still step on you. Because the problem was never your size. It was their vision. They were taught not to see people like me, and no amount of disappearing on my part was going to change that. I got married at 19 to a man who barely looked at me even on our wedding day. He was black too, but he carried so much shame about it, so much anger. He was ashamed of himself, ashamed of me, ashamed of everything we were. When we walked down the street together, he'd walk 3 steps ahead like he didn't know me. When his friends came over, he never introduced me. I'd just bring them drinks and disappear into the kitchen. In family photographs, I was always on the edges, sometimes cut off completely when they developed the film, literally invisible, even in my own family pictures. I had 4 children before I turned 30, worked 16 hours a day to keep food on the table. I'd clean houses in the morning, do laundry for families in the afternoon, iron clothes at night while my baby slept. My husband drank away most of what I earned. My children grew up fast, too fast, and suddenly I was a grandmother at 42. And in all those years, in all that life, I was living and surviving and pushing through. I had never taken a single photograph where I was in the center, not one. I was always in the back, always on the side, always half cropped out, always invisible. For 53 years, I thought this was normal. I thought this was just how life worked, that my role was to serve everyone else, to support, to sacrifice, to disappear so others could shine. I didn't question it. I didn't even think about it. That's just what women like me did. That's just what black women did. We held up the world and stayed invisible doing it until my youngest daughter, Angela, asked me something that broke through all those years of acceptance. She was 18, getting ready for college, and we were looking through old photo albums together. She kept flipping pages and then she stopped and looked at me with this confused expression and said, "Mama, why are you never in any of these pictures? And when you are, why are you always in the back? It's like you don't want to exist." I opened my mouth to answer her and realized I had no answer, none. Because for the first time in my entire life, I actually thought about it. I really thought about it. And I realized she was right. I really didn't think I deserved to be in the center of anything. I thought my place was on the margins. I thought taking up space, being seen, existing too loudly was wrong, selfish, inappropriate. I had spent 53 years making myself invisible because somewhere deep down I learned that being seen meant being inconvenient, and being inconvenient meant being unwanted. That question from Angela haunted me for weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. How I always sat in the last pew at church. How I never ordered what I actually wanted at restaurants, always just saying whatever's easiest. How I apologized constantly for things that weren't my fault, for simply existing in a space. How I'd cross the street to avoid making white people uncomfortable by walking past them. How I made myself small in 1,000 tiny ways every single day. Angela took me to a different church one Sunday, a small place I'd never been before. There was a woman preaching that day, a black woman in her 60s, standing up in front of 200 people, speaking with authority and power and taking up so much space it almost hurt to watch. I had never, not once in my life, seen a woman who looked like me being that visible, being that loud, being that unapologetic about existing. That woman said something that broke me wide open. She said, "You think you're invisible? You're not. You're just surrounded by people who were taught not to see black people. But God sees you. And when God sees you, it doesn't matter who closes their eyes." I cried for an hour after that service, cried so hard I couldn't breathe, because I understood, finally understood, that I had spent 53 years trying to be seen by people who had decided not to see me, trying to be valued by people who had decided I had no value, trying to exist in spaces that were built specifically to erase me. And that search for their acceptance, for their acknowledgement, for their permission to exist had almost killed me. Because when you depend on other people to tell you that you exist, you live in constant terror of disappearing. The change didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some magical transformation where I woke up the next day feeling powerful and visible. It was slow, it was hard, it was terrifying. I started small. I started sitting in the middle pews at church instead of the back. I started looking people in the eye when I talked to them. I started saying my name when people called me the girl or the cleaning lady or whatever dismissive thing they used instead of asking who I was. My name is Ruth. That's what I started saying. My name is Ruth. I stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Stopped saying sorry when someone bumped into me. Stopped shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were too small for me. And it felt wrong at first. It felt selfish and loud and inappropriate because 50 years of training doesn't disappear in a day. But I kept doing it. I kept existing a little bit louder each day. I started asking to be in the center of family photos. Started speaking up when people talked over me. Started taking up space on the bus instead of squeezing myself into the smallest possible position. And the wildest thing happened. The world didn't end. People didn't hate me. Some people were uncomfortable, sure. Some people didn't like it when I stopped being invisible. But those were the people who benefited from my invisibility in the first place. The people who needed me small to feel big. And their discomfort wasn't my problem anymore. My husband didn't like the change. He wanted the quiet, invisible wife back, the one who never questioned him, never challenged him, never took up space. We divorced when I was 58. It was the scariest and freest thing I'd ever done. After 40 years of marriage, I chose myself. I chose being visible over being tolerated. I'm 76 years old now. My children are grown and have families of their own. I have 11 grandchildren, and every single one of them knows my name, knows my story, knows that their grandmother isn't the girl or the maid or that woman over there. I'm Ruth, black, strong, and visible, not because the world finally changed and decided to see me, but because I stopped asking for permission to exist. I stopped making myself small. I stopped bowing my head. I stopped accepting that my value depended on who was looking at me. I exist now with or without an audience, with or without approval, with or without the space other people think I should have, because I don't need space given to me anymore. I take the space I deserve, and I deserve space. Just by being alive, just by being here, I deserve to be seen. If you're watching this and you feel invisible, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not invisible. You are undervalued by people who profit from your invisibility. You are ignored by people who are afraid of what would happen if you took up the space you actually deserve. You are silenced because your voice questions structures and systems that need your silence to keep functioning. Your invisibility isn't a defect in you. It's a strategy designed to keep you small. It's their strategy, not yours. You who are hiding in your own body right now, you who speak quietly so you don't bother anyone, you who sit in the back of rooms, you who don't take pictures because you think you don't look good enough, you who accept crumbs because you've been taught you don't deserve the whole plate. You who believe your purpose is to serve others and never be served yourself. Wake up. You weren't born to be furniture in other people's lives. You weren't born to decorate their stories while yours goes unlived. You weren't born to be convenient. You were born to take up space, to be seen, to make noise when it's necessary, to exist loudly and clearly and without apologizing for breathing. God didn't make you invisible. He made you exactly as you needed to be made. And if the world can't see you, the problem is their blindness, not your existence. Blind people don't get to define who has light. Stop disappearing. Stop bowing your head. Stop accepting crumbs. Stop believing you're too much when really you're exactly enough, exactly right, exactly what you need to be. I wasted 53 years believing I was supposed to be invisible. You don't have to waste one more day. Exist loudly now because you were always visible. You were just surrounded by people who were trained not to see, and their training is not your truth. And that wraps up today's story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment telling me your location. It's always amazing to see this community from all over the world. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Your support means everything and helps me continue telling stories that matter. Thank you for being here, and until next time.